Hello viewers, welcome to this session on Postgraduate Diploma in Environmental and Occupational Health. Today we will discuss on the mining industry, the occupational hazards that are associated in the mining industry and also the environmental impacts which are occurring in this industry due to this industry. This forms a part of the course code MEVE 004 Industrial Sector. I introduce myself as Dr. Sushmita Bhaskar, working in the School of Interdisciplinary and Transdisciplinary Studies, Indira Gandhi National Open University, New Delhi. Now, after listening to this module, you should be able to understand the terminologies related to the mining and the various types of the mining and how the mining industry, this contributes to several environmental problems, environmental issues, and also the health related diseases which are encountered in the people who are working in such industries. So if we talk about the mining industry, India produces nearly 88 minerals which include the fuel, the atomic, metallic, non-metallic minerals. It is also the leading producer of chromite, of iron ore, of zinc, bauxite, manganese, aluminium and the copper minerals. The Geological Survey of India and the Indian Bureau of Mines, they report that the recoverable reserves of 58 type of minerals excluding the fuel minerals. The top mineral bearing states in India, these include Jharkhand, Odisha and Chhattisgarh. Now in this they are producing 70% of coal, 80% of hematite ore, that is iron ore, then you have 60% of bauxite, 40% of manganese. All of India's chromite are found just in these states. If you have ever taken a road ride, along the Konkan Goa coastal belts and also in some places in Kerala, you will find these laterite profiles, soil profiles, where this is also a very good and rich source of the aluminium ores, that is the bauxite, because they also contain a very rich amount of aluminium and also iron contained in them. So therefore there are a lot of minerals and India is hosting a large amount of the minerals in the different states. The forest areas, they are inhabited by the tribal people. Their livelihoods are dependent and their economy is intertwined with the fate of the forest and the water resources, several other resources that are found in the forest. The tribal people, they have suffered due to the several developmental projects and also the mining activities. For example, for the construction of roads, for the construction of dams, then these people have been displaced from one place to another. So these environmental impacts and the socio-economic reasons, that is also a very major factor which is being understood and studied in the field of environmental studies. The classification system that is used for reporting the mineral resources and the mineral reserves in our country. So the National Mineral Inventory under the Indian Bureau of Mines, they have followed the United Nations Framework Classification for the fossil energy and mineral resources since the year 2000. It is a globally recognized system that provides a method of standardization for regularity and also for the statistical purposes, for the regulatory and the statistical purposes. Now let us see the type of the mines. So here we see the open cast mines. This is also known as the open pit and the open cut mines. It is a mining practice on the surface of the earth for extraction of the minerals. The overburden is relatively thin and this is the surface material is relatively thin. Now in many parts in the world, even in Czech Republic, here you have the open cast mines and also coal mining is being practiced, where several areas of the land is being degraded and also the air is also very polluted. Underground mines. So here, as the word indicates, they have a thick overburden material and the minerals are mined at the subsurface levels. So as the name indicates, they are situated in the deeper levels of the earth's crust. And here you need special shaft and special lifts which are constructed within, and then you need to go in them, or you need to even climb down in order to get to these levels. Now in terms of the extent, the mining is broadly divided into the two major types. You have the large scale mining. So mining is done on a large scale. It is mechanized and it involves a huge amount of investment. The large scale mining, this involves big companies which make huge investment and they can also employ the skilled and the unskilled labor. Small scale mining. Now here we find the artisanal and the small scale mining. This is an activity where several people, that is on a small scale, just like cottage industries, where the people, the group or communities, they mine a small potential area using certain indigenous techniques. Commonly, an informal or illegal mining practice is done, and this is mostly prevalent in the developing nations. Now, the waste generated as a result of mining, that is of concern. The mining extraction, for example, you use the techniques like drilling, then blasting, then the beneficiation, the crushing, the milling, and also the refining of the special ores. Now, even when a blast occurs, normally hours before, the people are informed in that area that the mining activity is going to be conducted, and because the big boulders, they can all even roll down, from the top to the bottom. And these are also being done in certain areas, even for the limestone mining which occurs in Meghalaya, those terrains wherever the minerals are being excavated for their economic purposes. So, the people are normally informed before. The extraction, this involves the removal of the ore mineral by the process of drilling and blasting. So, in all these processes, we have a voluminous amount of waste such as soil, debris, rock, these particles, all this are being liberated, and then this waste is of concern. The open cast mine, this alone it produces 10 times more waste than the underground mines. For example, for producing a ton of copper, 110 tons of the waste and an overburden of 200 tons is generated. Roughly 50 billion tons of the ore annually, they are mined around the globe. After extraction, the concentration of the ore mineral is done by grinding and the milling processes. These generate the slurry, and they comprise of the mine tailings. The tailings will contain some hazardous materials, such as it can contain arsenic, it can contain cyanide, mercury, lead, and also pyrite. So here in this figure you can see how the color and how hazardous these mine tailings can be. The waste rocks from the underground mines, they have sulfides such as the chalcopyrite and the pyrite. These sulfide bearing waste rocks, on reaction with water, they can then generate the acids. These acids can react with the rocks, and in turn they can release the heavy metals such as lead, chromium, and they can be toxic even in very small quantities, and that will then lead to the acid mine drainage. Now, the environmental impacts. This depends on the life of a mine. Another important factor is how the mine is closed after exhausting the ore deposit, because sometimes all the mining activities are done and then is it closed, or is the mineral abandoned after the mineral resources exhausted. You will see sometimes they are just abandoned and they remain just the same. Or is the mining unit phased out in a planned manner. Damage to the soil ecology. Now, the deforestation, that is one factor. The vegetation cover is completely wiped off during the mining operations. Large scale mining, this involves the use of the heavy machineries, for example the bulldozer and the excavators, for mining the metal and the minerals through the soil. So this will actually totally devastate and degrade the topsoil, so that the entire topsoil layer itself is taken off in the process. The sites and these are also prone to weathering and erosion. Mining activities are also responsible for increase of sedimentation in nearby water bodies. For example, they can be the ponds, the lakes, the streams, and thus they can affect the local ecology of these water bodies. Air and the noise pollution. Blasting and the drilling process, they can give out a lot of the air pollution. That is the suspended fine particulate matter, the metal dust in the air. All this is hazardous to the respiratory system. And prolonged exposure to such polluted air, that can cause various chronic respiratory diseases. Noise, this can also result in the hearing impairments. Water pollution. Extraction processes. This will accumulate the waste comprising the rock, the loose material, and also the soil. Now, if the waste has sulfide materials or the sulfide minerals such as chalcopyrite and pyrite or galena, then they can initiate acid mine drainage, which we just discussed in the previous slides. So all this can cause water pollution, and then that can affect the health of people when this water gets contaminated with the drinking water that we are using for our consumption. Therefore, acids can pollute the soil, the surface water, and if they infiltrate the groundwater, then that is also contaminated. During rain also, these toxins and these acids from the waste dump they can run off into the stream and the rivers, causing pollution. Refining processes of metals, they can involve the use of many chemicals, for example arsenic, the mercury and also cyanide during the gold refining. In general, the waste generated during the metal refining process, they can contain the toxic materials which even in the trace amounts or trace quantities, they can be very hazardous to the environment. Rare earth element bearing minerals. These include the monazite, allanite, then the perovskite. They contain radioactive materials. They get concentrated in the tailings and can contaminate the surface as well as the groundwater. Bautu in China. Now here this is also referred to as a rare earth capital of the world, and here people are complaining of several adverse health and environmental effects. Occupational hazards. Hazardous occupations and the adverse mining conditions in the quarries and the underground mines, these are often encountered in many of the developing countries. So approximately 20 million people globally, they are engaged in this artisanal gold mining. And these artisanal gold miners in this mining industry, they often use mercury to release gold from the ore through a process which is known as mercury amalgamation. Now the workers, they are poor, they are illiterate and they do not have the knowledge that this mercury can cause certain toxic effects to the human health. So the lack of knowledge which is causing the adverse effects of using mercury. And also the artisanal mining is run illegally with no environmental and health regulation, and thus the miners are exposed to the toxic chemicals and especially mercury. So therefore artisanal gold mining contributes to approximately 1/3 of the global annual release of mercury to the environment. And cyclostomiasis. This is a hookworm infection which is caused by the infection with Ancylostoma hookworms. Now this ancyllostomiasis is also known as the miner's anemia, the tunnel disease and also the brickmaker's anemia. The pneumoconiosis. This is again another type of the chronic lung condition and infections which is noticed in the mining or the miners, and they are characterized by fibrotic changes in the lung tissue, other complications due to exposure to dust of the particle size 0.5 to 3 micron. The coal miners' pneumoconiosis has been declared a notifiable disease in the Indian Mines Act of 1952, and it is also compensatable in the Workmen's Compensation Amendment Act of 1959. Silicosis. It is caused by inhalation of the dust containing free silica or silicon dioxide. It was first reported in India from the Kolar gold mines, Mysore in 1947, and in the mica mines of Bihar. Out of 329 miners who were examined, 34% were found to be suffering from the silicosis. In this figure what you see is a lung of a patient who was suffering from silicosis. Anthracosis and asbestosis. These are also certain medical related terminologies which are related to the occupational hazards faced in the mining industry. A diffuse parenchymal lung disease that is caused by the accumulation of inhaled carbon or coal dust. The black lung disease. This includes the breathing in of the coal particles, and the particles then settle into the airways and the lungs. So that is why it is referred to as anthracosis. Asbestos fibers. This again, those who are working with the asbestos industry, they usually, the fibers are between 20 to 500 millimeters in length and 0.5 to 50 millimeters in diameter. The pulmonary fibrosis, this leads to respiratory insufficiency and death. Carcinoma of the bronchus, mesothelioma of the pleura and also the peritoneum, that is the covering and the layers of the lungs. Therefore, the deposition of the excess iron in the body tissue, this is also known as the pulmonary siderosis or the Welder's disease, and this is also a form of pneumoconiosis. So what are the key issues in managing the mine waste? So we just saw some of the health hazards and some of the diseases that are encountered among the workers who are working in the mining industries for a long period of time. Therefore, regulation of the mines and the mineral development is important. Preservation of the natural environment is of prime importance and consideration. The control of flood and the prevention of pollutions are also important in dealing with the mine waste. To avoid danger to the public health or communications, we need to ensure safety of the buildings, monuments and other structures. We need to conserve the mineral resources and maintain safety in all the mines. The principal health and safety and labor laws that are applicable to the mining industry. The Mines Act, this sets out the provisions regulating the mining, the health and safety of the laborers, employment terms, inspection of the mines, etc. The Mine Rules of 1955, this set out the framework for the medical examination of labor, basic health and sanitation provisions, and the welfare amenities for the miners and their families. The Directorate General of the Mine Safety, this is the Indian government agency for safety in the mines. Banishment and recycling of the mining waste product. The Hazardous and Other Waste, that is the Management and Transboundary Movement Rules 2016, Hazardous Waste Rules of 2016. This is a primary legislation which is relating to the management and recycling of the mining waste products. The Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change is granting the environmental clearance for the mining operations, and they specify the conditions and restrictions for the management and recycling of such waste. The State Pollution Control Board also is important in issuing the consent to operate these certain mines, and they also specify certain conditions where the leaseholder has the right to explore and exploit the mining waste products in the tailing ponds and the waste piles, subject to any restriction under the Hazardous Waste Rules of 2016. The management of the waste. So, large amount of the rock and the soil, this is generated both by the open cast mining and also by the underground mining. This overburden, they can be stacked in the mine area and they can be stabilized by using certain plant trees like eucalyptus or Acacia magnium, the same way the Peltaforium. All these are certain plants and they can be used in order to stabilize these mine piles and the waste. Now, the tailing dams, toxic material will not seep or flow to the soil or the surface or the groundwater when the tailing dams are being used, and proper lining of these tailing dams also is done using certain important materials. Reclamation. The waste rock material of these coming from the mine, they can be used in the road making, in construction activities and also in certain landfills. After the mine closure, the excavation during mining or the quarrying, they can be filled with this waste rock itself in order to stabilize the mining site or the mined site area. This site can be reused as a recreational park. For example, some of the parks that have been done so are the Victoria Park in British Columbia, where the limestone quarry was converted into a sunken garden known as the Butchart Gardens. So, there are several examples and case studies where the mining area have been used properly and they have been converted into recreational areas. Acts and the amendments. Under the Constitution of India, the states have the power to regulate the mines and the mineral development. However, this power is subject to the federal laws and the regulations on mining. The Mines and the Mineral Development and Regulation Act of 1957, the central legislation, they regulate the mining sector and ensures that the state exercise their power within a uniform national framework. The Mines Act of 1952, here again regulations for the health and safety in the mine and the conduct of the mining operations is specified. Development and regulation of the offshore mineral resources, this is regulated by the Offshore Areas Mineral Development and Regulation Act of 2002. Again, the Mines and the Minerals Development and Regulation Amendment Act came up in 2010. The District Mineral Foundation, this was an amendment to the Mine and the Mineral Development and Regulation Act of 1957, and this came out in March 2015, which led to the formation of the District Mineral Foundation. This is a statutory and non-profit trust for the benefit of the people working in the mining affected areas. This amendment recognizes the rights of the people and it is a vehicle to address some of the poorest regions in the country. The Pradhan Mantri Khanij Kshetra Kalyan Yojana. In September 2015, the Union government launched this Yojana for the development and welfare of the mining areas and the people affected by mining activities. This scheme has been noted by the Ministry of Mines as a revolutionary and unprecedented scheme that will transform the lives of people affected directly and indirectly by mining. It says that 60% of this, the funds that should be used for the health of the people, for the drinking water that comes for the people, the women and child development and education, and also to support the livelihoods of the several people. Finally, we come on to the community mining. So this community or cooperative mining is very important, and the cooperatives bring people together in a democratic and equal way. There are several indigenous ways that are used by farmers in order to sustain themselves. Now here again there are several areas where the farmers lack the knowledge and they use certain kind of chemicals for the mining activities, but in certain areas in our own country the farmers have managed this very well, and by the use of this cooperative and community mining and using certain traditional techniques, and even by converting these mined lands for the positive benefit of mankind, these indigenous ways by the farmers, they are able to protect their livelihoods and also sustain themselves in a proper and sustainable way. So my dear learners, in this session we addressed the concerns that of the employees who are facing their problems in the mining sector and the mining industry. We also saw some of the types of the mining that are being done, and we also saw the several diseases that people encounter in the mining industries. We also saw how the environmental health is being affected, and pollution of the water bodies and the air pollution is also occurring as a result of the mining activities. Finally, we have seen certain acts and amendments and certain policies which come, and how the mining sector also needs to be regulated, how the health of these employees also need to be taken into account, and how the community mining and cooperative mining can also bring people together and work in a sustainable manner. Thank you for your patient listening.